Welcome back to Novas and Friends with a technical episode. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel because we're so close to hitting 100 subscribers. Share this video to everyone. Today I'm going to learn how to set up and use a MIG welder. The MIG in MIG welder stands for a Russian fighter jet that Maverick saw back in the 80s. Actually, MIG is an acronym for Metal Inert Gas. This type of welding is easy to learn and inexpensive. I have never done this before myself, so let's get started. Our welder is made by Miller, a great traditional company, but with today's technology, there are other affordable clones that will do the same thing at a cheaper price. This won't be a review video, just a basic setup and melt the metal video. The welder runs on 220 to 250 volts AC. It can weld 24 gauge to 5/16 inch mild steel. These are other available that can run on 115 to 125 volts AC, in case you do not have 220 to 250 in your garage yet. Those welders will weld sheet metal fine, but nothing thick. Let's go over the basic parts. For safety, we are going to leave the welder unplugged. Here is the industrial inert gas. It is a mixture of 75% argon and 25% carbon dioxide. Attached to the bottle is a flow regulator. For welding mild steel indoors, set your regulator for 15 to 25 cubic feet an hour. This setting will vary depending on how clean your metal is and if there's any breeze that can blow away your inert shielding gas. Moving on, let's take a look inside. Inside, there's a spool of welding wire, tensioner, feed wheel, and a chart to set up our welder for various thicknesses of steel. Here's the control panel with a basic on-off switch, wire speed control, and amperage control. These can all vary depending on the thickness of metal and type of welding you're going to produce. Next is the ground strap. This must be attached to whatever you are going to be welding. Finally, we have arrived at the business end. Here's the welding gun, also known as the welding torch in some countries. Let's go over the basic parts. Here's the nozzle. Underneath that is the tip. The wire is fed out the tip through the nozzle before making contact with whatever you are welding. Shielding gas travels out the nozzle, keeping your weld clean. This is the neck of the gun. And here's the trigger. Now that we have gone over the gun basics, now it's time to go over safety. When a welder is operating, it emits several hazards: extremely bright ultraviolet rays, electricity, hot flame metal, and toxic gases. Ensure you have and wear the appropriate safety attire and work in a well-ventilated space. Now, let's get welding. For practice, we have made a few coupons out of different thicknesses of mild steel. Some are clean, and others have scale, rust, and paint on them. This will help simulate welding in a real-world situation. Because I'm a beginner, I'm going to cheat some and use the auto set function. This should get the wire speed and amperage settings close enough for me to practice. To start out, I'm going to be practicing on clean metal and make a basic tack weld. I've been instructed to hold the gun at a 45-degree angle and practice at different distances from the workpiece. This should give me a feel for what the distance and angle works best for me. After some practice, this is what my welds are starting to look like. I've been told that one of the hardest welds to do is the overhead butt weld on sheet metal. So I'm going to practice a sheet metal butt weld on the bench first. Here's my first try at doing it. It looks pretty good. Now it's time for us to practice doing a harder weld. Well, it's the first try at trying to do a more distanced gap. Burnt through some. Now let's try with some unprepped steel. Well, that's the first try at doing some unprepped steel. Alright, now we're going to do some rusty and undercoated steel. Notice how ugly those welds are. Now let's try it with a gap hanging in the air and rusty steel. Alright, let's try that again. take a look at how bad those welds are too. But they are pretty good for the fact that they have rust all over them. Alright guys, let's practice doing it on some much thicker stuff. Let's first try with some really thick stuff. It's quite terrible. That's why we're practicing it. Here we go. Now that we've tacked it together, we're going to fill it. Well, that's my first try at doing a butt weld on thick steel. Alright, now I'm going to practice doing butt welds with different gaps and with and without rust.
Oh. Here's a butt weld.
Alright, whenever you're welding on a color, make sure you don't get it too hot, or else you might start warping the panels, and that might just be an absolute nightmare to fix. Alright guys, well, I've been welding these pieces together to practice different distances and angles. Thanks for watching guys, we'll see you next time.